Hi, and welcome to Women of Worth Wednesday. I thought I would surprise all of you and be a few minutes early, because oftentimes we're a few minutes late. I'm so thrilled to be starting out the new year. We had a great message last week, but I'm here with my dear friend, Kristie, and she is wise and one of my faith friends, and the person that I turn to for when I get confused and need clarity, and I hope that you have a list of people that you do that as well. And thank you for using Women of Worth as one of your places that you go to for support and ideas and strength to help you on your journey through this sometimes crazy life.
Yep.
So I'm gonna, like I often do when I have a guest that I know really well, I pretend I don't. So that those of you that aren't familiar will join in this journey with this conversation, just as if we're just meeting for the first time. So, Kristie is a therapist here along the Wasatch Front. Where do you practice at? Where's your...
So I'm in West Jordan. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So I get to do both therapy and med management.
Which is kind of a nice combination for those that are not familiar with the mental health profession.
Yeah.
There's varied degrees
yeah.
of social workers, psychologists, and a nurse practitioner with her training is such a great combination. West Jordan, for those that are watching from Nigeria,
yes,
is along the Wasatch Front, just south of Salt Lake and north of Point of the Mountain, if you're familiar. And what do you specialize in, and what was your journey? You went straight to nursing, but why did you want to do more than that?
I think my undergrad, I just really liked the psych part of things.
Okay.
I like being able to talk more to my patients and get in there, rather than just being at the hospital where I didn't get to work as much specifically with emotions and people's day-to-day lives.
So you were in the trenches, but you realized it was helpful
to get in their head,
yeah,
get in their emotions.
So that you weren't just seeing them come back to the hospital all the time?
Yeah.
And what was the first step you went towards getting some more training in the area of therapy?
So I was first working at Community Mental Health, and they introduced one of my colleagues introduced a program there called Dialectical Behavior Therapy. It's for people that are highly suicidal and really struggle to regulate emotions, and I loved it because it was very skill-based. So I went and got certified in that program, and now offer a comprehensive program in West Jordan for that, that really helps people learn skills to build a life worth living.
Which is where DBT comes from.
Yeah, Dialectical Behavior Therapy.
Dialectical Behavior Therapy. And I love, we share a similar why in our work, and that is to intervene and support around depression and anxiety and suicide, and especially this time of year.
Yep.
During these winter months, it can be a heightened time
for sure
for people that struggle. But I think even for people that you don't think struggle, they may be feeling some shift at the beginning of the year and struggling to kind of navigate New Year's and the winter months and trying to see what the future... There's a lot of people hurting.
Yes.
We talk on a regular basis.
Lots of people in pain.
There's a lot of people hurting, and we're grateful that this is a faith-based community, but it's so great that in this faith-based community we can talk about some skills, and I love that you're very skills-based. And I think that's using our agency that Heavenly Father has said, like, you have a body and you have a brain.
Go learn some skills.
Yeah, and use these skills, because He knows that we're dealing with some hard stuff, and so you're a great resource. Okay, so then one of your specialty areas, in addition to the skills of DBT, was getting some additional training in what area?
So then about 5 years ago, it's been 6 years ago, I was mom of 2-year-old twins. I'm still mom, but my kids were my kids were two at the time, and I was having a kind of a mom crisis of like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. And a lot of my own, like, I'm not enough stories were coming up. And professionally, I was dealing with this group of clients that just were not making the progress that I kind of had anticipated or that we've had in the program. And
so with the skills that you normally teach, they
weren't making all the progress that I was expecting. And when I really, looked into it, it was that same thing. I'm not enough, this shame, this, feeling of worthless. And so I, as I do, because I'm really evidence-based, got online and started searching for evidence-based programs for shame and found Brene Brown's work and went and got certified with Brene Brown's group and have, loved that work so much.
So for those of you we were talking a couple months ago, there's still people that don't know who Brene Brown is. And I don't want to be offensive to anyone, but we found that shocking. And so for those of you that don't know Brene Brown, she does a lot of shame-based work. She has a very famous TED Talk. Mm-hmm. And from a gospel perspective, I often teach this shame story with the woman found in adultery, where the Savior found her and everyone was ready to stone her, which is very shame-based. Mm-hmm. It was, you are bad, and so we're going to destroy you. And the Savior taught us shame versus guilt pretty clearly. Yep. And he said, what you're doing is not okay, but you're of value to me. And that's why he said, anyone else here, perfect, you go ahead and cast the first stone. And Brene's work is really based on that, challenging that story in our heads that we're not enough. Yep. And as moms and women of worth, I mean, if there's anybody watching that knows a woman, you probably know a woman then that is struggling with that same story. For sure. Because we're vulnerable, right? Yep. Yep. And the other thing about Brene that we both love is that she really talks about how connection is how we're wired. Yep. And that we really can only reach connection when we're vulnerable with each other, which I really believe is why the ministering program has changed and why it's a little bit more about really knowing what the person you're assigned to needs, which means the person you're assigned to needs to be vulnerable with the person assigned, mm-hmm. so that we really are ministering to each other.
We have to be clear on that why of vulnerability, though. So one of the things I love about her work is her real connection to values. And DBT actually has a part of values, too. So I was doing some of that. I was doing some of that before, but I think Brene's work brought that to a bigger sense.
And I think that's an important note because she often gets misquoted that we are expecting everyone to stand up in church, tell everyone in Relief Society all your
what authenticity is.
Yeah, that vulnerability really is being clear about how much you're sharing and why you're sharing it and who you're sharing it with. Yep. So that's a great background, but we wanted to give tools today. Yeah. And it's the new year, and there's a lot of posts right now about losing weight, making money, changing something dramatic in your life, and making these big goals so that you can achieve them. And we're now mid-January, and if you made goals the 1st of January, you may have already thrown them out there.
Yeah, you're lucky if they're still going, right? Like the average is, I think, the middle to first part of February. Yeah. Most of New Year's resolutions have been broken and gone.
Yeah.
And caused a lot of shame.
Yeah, and caused a lot of shame, which I was just going to say that too. I always think we should be making New Year's goals at Easter time. Because Easter time is when we're talking about the resurrection and the atonement. And, the first of the year, we have these big ideas of if I can just fix A, B, or C in my life, then I will feel happier and my life will be more productive. But you and I both practice a kind of a different approach to that. Instead of having one big goal or 3 big goals for the year, we choose some values for the year and help guide that. And so I'm going to kind of turn the time over to you. If you were talking to someone and they're like, what are you talking about values?
Yeah. So we got to define values first. So the difference between values and goals. So values are a direction for our life. They're like a compass. If we said today, like, we're going to head north and we went to Portland, there'd still be more north to go, right? We don't get to check values off of a list. So for my clients that really struggle with perfectionism, that's a huge distinction.
No one in Women of Worth struggles.
Which probably lots of us do. Yeah. I do. I'm a recovering perfectionist that I practice every day, right? Yeah. So yeah, we have to keep in mind that values are never checked off the list. If I value having healthy relationships and I go to bed tonight and think, oh, I connected with my kids really well today, I have really healthy relationships, I gotta wake up tomorrow and still work on them. Right? But our goals can be directed by those values. I could set a goal today that I'm going to tell both my kids twice today that I love them, right? And because I feel like that might help that healthy relationship with them. And then tonight I get to check that off the list and say, hey, I did that.
So why is a value-based approach to the new year less shaming?
So I threw out New Year's goals like 10 years ago and started this value practice, and then added some pieces of Brene's work 5 years ago when I got certified in hers, because it allows them to morph through the year. Okay. Right? So I choose 2 values for the year because I have lots more values than 2. Yeah. But trying to work on more than 2 is overwhelming.
If you're unfamiliar with what values, you may be going, I don't even know what values.
What words are.
Go to Pinterest. You can get lists of 70,000 values, which can be overwhelming. And you always say to clients, go through the list.
Highlight everything first that you know for you creates a meaningful life. And only put question marks by the shoulds, because we get our values from cultures that we're raised in, right? From families, from religious cultures, from communities that we're raised in. And one of our developmental tasks as an adult is to clarify those values and make sure they're really ours. Because living our life according to somebody else's values doesn't create a life worth living.
So an example of that is I do a radio show called the KSL Mom Show. And the host, Lindsay, often talks about what does it mean to be a good mom? Because within maybe a Latter-day Saint culture, we had a cultural definition of what that looked like, which was canning, sewing, staying at home. And if you're and if you're watching this and both of us have careers, and you have to challenge that as an adult, what does that mean? Lindsay describes hers as, did I connect? Did I keep her alive? And did I teach her something today?
Learning.
And at the end of the day, she has to keep it that simple, because, right, if we're not clear on what that means, that's why a value is important. Like, I value being a good mom, but what does a good mom look like? Right.
Yeah. And I think you can go, if the lists really overwhelm you, you can also do something like that where you think, you know, what do I want my kids to say about me at my 80th birthday party? Right? I want them to say that I was connected to them. At the end of the day, that's most meaningful to me. So sitting down and just free writing even and saying,
so just marking the ones that speak to you. Don't meaningful. Judge it. Don't get crazy about, like, what does this mean?
And then narrow it down to 5 maybe.
5. And
then down to 2. Like 2 working on ones. Right? We're going to live other values this year. But these are the 2 that I really feel like I need to focus and work on this year.
So going back to your compass idea, that means then as you're journeying through this next year, you're making the smaller goals to help, but the compass is helping you towards that direction.
Yeah, it anchors me in. Yeah. So Brene uses, I brought my lantern today.
Yeah.
So Brene uses the lantern metaphor and talks a lot about how our
really
values,
cute lantern,
I love it. Our values are the flame.
Okay.
Right. And so they're what guide the way when things get dark in arenas. When we show up in our life and you're having, you know, this morning,
so everyone can see. So the flame inside.
The flame inside is the values.
Is the value.
And so when things get dark, this morning my nanny called in sick and I was stressed about like trying to make it to work. I have work today too. These become what lights the way. What's most important though is my kids are safe and connected today with somebody, right? And that I keep my commitments. Keeping commitments is a value for me, right?
So one of the values that would be maybe in there that needed protecting today was the
commitments that I'd already made.
Okay.
Right? And the safety of my kids.
So both, which is really interesting because I often call you and say, both my values are in conflict, right? Or 2 values in my life are in conflict, right?
Yeah.
Where you want to be there for your kids, but you also value showing up for your clients today. And so...
And we have to prioritize. Sometimes we can find ways, like I did today with the help of good friends and family, found ways to make both work. Right?
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to choose one. But the values light the way when things get really dark in arenas and we wonder, why were we doing this really hard thing? Because going towards our values is not always fun or easy.
No. And you know what? Let me stop you there because I think that's important to know that oftentimes I hear from women, and I think men get in this place too, but they're not as quick to reach out and go, I'm kind of having crazy thinking. I'm working so hard at my calling as Young Women's President, and I'm trying to keep the house clean, and now we're doing Come Follow Me. And my kids are fighting, and I haven't even read the New Testament, and I don't even know how long. And so all of a sudden, the story in your head starts to feel really dark.
Yeah. And
you're really clear you're not enough. You're not showing up great on any front.
Yeah.
What would be an example of how a value could help you out of that dark?
So that's where I've got to come back to what's the core value.
Okay.
Right? Like my core value is connection. Today I'm going to focus on connection with the kids.
Which may be one verse you read in scripture.
Yep. So this is how I'm going to be able to do those other pieces while I focus on that connection. And I think it's important to note with that example because one of the myths in culture is that if we aren't going towards the value, we must not really value it. Which is a big shame message, right? Like, if you valued health, then you'd be exercising every day. So you must not really be valuing health.
Don't you love that?
Not true. So not true.
I love that because then what we've learned on shame research is if you're in shame, you literally keep sabotaging yourself.
Shame moves us away from our values. Not because I don't value it. I totally value health. But when I don't feel like I'm good enough or that my body looks the way it's supposed to, then I don't exercise. Right. It's the shame that moves me away from the action, not that I don't value it.
Which we may have to bring Kristie back on for another shame discussion. But I think that's a really important point, which is why the Savior said to the woman, you know, he didn't say, hey, no big deal that you were sleeping with a married man, but I want you to move forward in your life, not be stuck in this.
Which is why, so every lantern has the glass.
Okay, so the glass is what?
The glass is what protects our values.
So what's
So
an
these
example?
are behaviors or people in your life that help you protect your values. So if one of my core values is connection, right? Okay. Connecting with myself, with my friends, with my family, with my kids. And some practices that sometimes it's basic things like sleep. Like if I don't get 7 hours of sleep, my lantern, my flame is way easier blown out.
Do you see that? Like when we're running around trying to do the best new beginnings as Young Women's President, perfectly clean house, and Come Follow Me by Pinterest, and we're not sleeping, then we're not...
The glass starts to disintegrate, and the winds of life can blow out your lantern.
And it gets very dark.
It gets very dark very fast, yeah. So it can be little things. Glass behavior for me is setting goals.
Okay.
So I set goals at the beginning of every month towards my values.
See how that's more adjustable? Because you don't know how your life's going to be in 6 months, but you do know the next few weeks.
This month I can work on this.
Yeah.
You mentioned another glass behavior for me is connection. I call them marble jar friends. You call them faith friends.
Yep.
Right? Is connection with my inner circle. Those people that love me because of my vulnerabilities, not despite them. Or despite them, but love me even when I'm vulnerable.
And by the way, that list is usually
really small. Like Brene says to cut a piece of paper 1 inch by 1 inch and write the people in it.
Square,
so really tiny square. And so really our group of people like that don't fit in a very big box. If you are lucky if you have one.
And do you guys see how this conversation with your teenagers today would be super helpful?
Oh, I love this. I have this one with my 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
Right? My kids are 8 now, and we talk a lot when they come home and they've gotten made fun of. We talk a lot about who's in the box.
Who's in the box?
Right? Is that person
tiny
in the box?
Tiny little box, yeah.
And are they helping to protect your values?
Your values,
right?
yeah. So perfect. Okay, so what's maybe one more behavior that keeps your flame protected?
Meditation for me is a big one. Mindfulness practices. And
you know what? That is not some Eastern philosophy, foo-foo, woo-woo. You know, we have scriptural references to pondering and meditating.
Every religion has has mindfulness incorporated in it. We call it, some religion calls it pondering. Prayer can be a form of mindfulness practice. But even the word meditate upon, we see that in the scriptures, and that's like, you got to get still and be quiet.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and get centered in yourself again, and that helps me remember what my values are, and make some of those hard decisions, like you're saying, when I'm like, but I have so many values, and there's so many conflicting things, that I can come back to just saying, okay, but my most core value right now is connection. And one
of my big whys for Women of Worth is reminding our listeners that when you do get still, that's when you really do see yourself through your Father's eyes. And in other religions, that's a different, I think sometimes we make it super complicated. It's really sitting and breathing.
Yeah.
There's so many apps. There's so many YouTube channel videos on, if you don't know what that feels like to just sit and be still and reconnect that you are not what you do or get done or your bank account, that you are of worth just because you are alive. That's the hugest protection in my life. And when I'm doing this, which I had a morning like that, I'm like, you know what? I've got to do some extra meditation today because I've forgotten who I belong to. Yeah. Okay, so the glass, then what?
The other part of the lantern is a handle that we actually have to hang on to, right? I mean, if we're gonna use the lantern, we have to hold it in our hands. Mm-hmm. But there's oftentimes times in our life where we start to let go of this lantern, and we want to catch those before we're 6 months and we have hurt relationships or we have destroyed some things in our own life, left jobs reactively. We want to notice this sooner, that we're starting to let go of our values.
So what would be a practical example of where someone might have let go of the lantern?
So I think that there are times where we get really busy and we start just doing the to-do list, the checklist, and we get away. I hear sometimes from clients of like, yeah, but I checked everything off with my kids and now my kids don't want to be home. Like, my kids are now young adults and I did everything by the book. But what they missed was connection, right? They were so busy focused on checking everything they were supposed to do every day with their kids that they weren't actually connecting with their kids. But they didn't notice it until it was not too late, because it's never too late. But until it got too far down the road to go, oh, I need to grab my values because actually this is about connection. and I'm going to practice connection.
Which is so important, because I think if you are listening to this and you don't have the connection that you want, if that's one of your values, and you're feeling like, I hear from a lot of readers and listeners that are grandmas that just cry because they're like, I didn't feed my kids organically. We didn't do those kind of family home evenings. And now all my kids have left the church and they don't want to come visit. You know, there's always an opportunity. I mean, that's the good news of the gospel. Is
we get to grab the lantern again.
We get to try
We
again.
get to find it again, right? We get to grab the lantern.
What's a skill that helps you grab the lantern?
So coming back to your glass behaviors, right? Coming back and setting a goal again, and coming back to that why again, and really affirming your why. So we've got to notice when we start to let go of it.
Okay.
Like, I start to feel more angry.
Resentment.
Resentment shows up big time. I start to hate everybody. Like, I know, you know, I'll have this, like, thought in my head at the end of the day, like, I hate everybody. And I really don't. But I don't at all.
Well,
right?
This morning I'm driving here to do this, and I am telling myself a story about people that I know love me, but I'm like, and they don't ever show up, and they don't ever do this, and they don't. And I'm like, wait, something's off for me right now.
I've let go of my lantern a little bit, right? Or I'm threatened to let go of the lantern a little bit, right? Maybe I haven't let go of it completely, but it's all feeling too hard, and I'm not zeroing in on what's the most important
So
thing.
An extreme example of this is like breaking your covenants, leaving your family, going in a crazy midlife crisis, really violating your values. You start using substances. You're not getting out of bed for days on end. Those are the extreme, but I love your idea of those subtle awarenesses.
Yeah.
And that goes back to why a faith friend or marble jar friend is super helpful.
Well, it's important. You can tell them these things.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
my faith friends are not yes men.
Yeah, no, these are signs for me that I'm starting to let go of my values, so that the person can say to you, okay, well, what do you need? Right? Yeah. Like, because we get so focused on, in fact, the friend I called this morning on the babysitting stuff, like, was like, okay, what do you need? Mm-hmm. Right? Because I just kept going, this isn't going to work. I can't do that. Well, what do you need? Mm-hmm. Right? And so it's that place of like, okay, what do I need to focus on so that I can come back to my values?
So, to kind of summarize this, if you're holding on to your lantern and your values are protected and you are clear on how to protect them because you have people and practices in your life that keep them protected, what will you start to notice in your life?
So that's the next big step of the lantern exercise that we do, is to start thinking about, what does it feel like to radiate that light, right? When I'm really connected with my values, what does it feel like internally? It's still hard, but I know my why. Like, it feels clear. I feel like it feels like the eye of a tornado sometimes. Yes. Where you're in that middle and life is still spinning around you, but you can find that calm centered of like, yeah, but I know why I did something. You know, many, many years ago, I made a decision to stay living in Utah. Really wanted to leave Utah for some valued reasons and had some jobs lined up. But there was some shifts in our family, and I found out that my mom was having a baby, and I really chose super mindfully to stay here because I wanted to connect with my brother. I wanted a relationship with him. And I do not regret that. Now, there are days that I'm like...
I don't regret it either, because I might not have met her.
But then there are days that are cold outside like this that I'm like, why am I living in Utah?
Why are we in Hawaii?
But I'm really clear on that why. Yeah. It's connection with him, and I would not give that up at all, ever.
So I really love the idea that when we're in a sacred space and we're being more value-driven, that light of Christ, I would call that, emanates from us and can direct our decisions. So you and I have talked, you know, clients and people I've talked to, there's been a lot of changes on the church front, and a lot of people don't love that ambiguity, that they're like, wait, what does ministering look like? It doesn't look like a checklist. And this is really pulling for all of us this place that we have to be very spirit directed.
I would say ambiguity is the wind. Some of the more of the wind. We talk a lot about what is the stuff, what are the sources of the wind that threaten to blow that lantern out. Uncertainty is, ambiguity is, right? Because then we get caught up with like how we're supposed to do it perfectly. Yeah. Instead of just coming back to the flame and looking at the why and then figuring out how to do it based on that why.
So whether your goals this year feel like you need to adjust things at home, at work, in your church responsibilities, we have a lot more flexibility. And we're supposed to be, I think, being prepared to be more spirit value directed instead of checklist directed. And that's uncomfortable, but what a gift that we are, you know, able to kind of help each other You know, there's a ton of posts out there now on how to do Come Follow Me, and there's tons of how do you, you know, raise the right kids, except there's not a lot of adult children resources. I just because I'm in that place right now, and I'm like, where are all the books? There's all these potty training books, but what about a 21-year-old? I don't know. So I think this is such a helpful tool. I know it is for me. But you have to hear things over and over again.
Yeah.
So
it's a practice.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. These are practices.
That's what I was getting to. Yeah. That it's not perfection, it's a practice.
No, and sometimes my goal for the month is to try to define my value a little more again. Or to ask other people how they're connecting. Right? Because I'm lost in how to connect right now with kids when they hit different developmental stages, right? Or it's simple practices. Sometimes it's not a new goal every month. Sometimes it's like a carryover of the last month and tweaking it a little bit because I couldn't accomplish what I thought I could accomplish.
Isn't that so much? Do you guys feel the difference of that? That is such a different, lighter feeling.
It's more compassionate.
It is.
Right? Compassion doesn't let us off the hooks. It says, nope, these are your values. So it's not indulgence, where indulgence is like, yeah, you had a rough day, go eat the whole milkshake. When I value health, that doesn't feel good because then I feel more shame and guilt the next day. But compassion says, you've had a really rough day, so go to bed a little bit early tonight, and then tomorrow morning you got to try again, right? And here's how you're going to try again. You're going to tweak it just a little bit so that it's more doable tomorrow.
I love that. I love the idea of self-compassion. I love the idea of returning back. I love the idea of shame versus guilt. Guilt is that feeling that, like, I don't like how this feels.
Yeah.
But shame is, I'm a horrible person. And God's never talking to us that way. And yet we talk to ourselves that way often. Yeah.
It's well practiced.
Yeah. Right? I would never talk to my friends the way I talk to myself at times. And that really does sabotage us from moving forward. So I love the idea of really perfection. If you want a scriptural based definition of it, it's complete, it's ripe, it's finished. None of us are that yet because we're alive and we're still figuring it out. And so I really appreciate your thoughts today. Where can people find you? We've tagged your Facebook page.
So I have a Facebook page. I also have a website, dbtnetworkofutah.net. And we're offering classes. Like we do a Gifts of Imperfection class every month, which is so much. It's a fun class. It starts next week in 2 different locations. And such a fun class on practices. That's what Brene's given us, I think, on things is practices that fit within whatever religion you are, whatever culture you're from. It's just practices to help you build more courage, compassion, and connection in your life, and to live more wholeheartedly, and to really embrace who you are. Yeah. So that we can build
and wholehearted living is really some authenticity. It's not acting like we have it all figured out. It is really, I think, the good news of the gospel that, you know what, we rejoice when we knew we were coming to this earth because we knew it was going to be hard and tough. I hope that people will, if you live locally, the Gifts of Imperfection class that's starting is a really fun class. And so you can follow that link and then follow the website and find out more information about that. Anything that we can do to kind of share this message of hope that we don't have to be perfect, and this hope that also that we're always just practicing. That means that if you fall down, you can start up again.
Yeah, we're wired for struggle.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, but our values is what give us meaning. It's what helps us to build a life worth living.
Yeah, so. I was just, in closing, I was just talking to a friend that I've known for years and years that struggled with some addiction and went into a really, really dark place. And the thing that he shared with me that was so profound that goes with this is that, you know, he had let go of the lantern, right? He had set it down. And he realized that he had spent a lot of time with substances and other addictive behaviors, which we all do at some
because life is miserable.
Right, because the feelings of uncomfortable sadness or anger or abandonment or loss, which we all experience,
everybody feels.
He was trying to get rid of that, and through his process of going through recovery and getting clean, he's realized, those hard feelings have come. But what's great is then all the good ones come too.
We don't get to selectively numb.
Yeah.
Right.
So the values and the lantern, I hope that visual, I love having images or methods by which to remember complex things. So I love the lantern because I invite everyone to try to decide just a couple of values this year. Yeah. And see if this year feels a little less like sabotaging and overwhelming.
Yeah, focus on progress, not that perfection or a destination. Yeah. The fun thing about that is just to close it off, that at the end of the year, you get to celebrate the progress.
Anything.
Right? Like, any little steps in that direction, it's not this like, oh my gosh, I didn't lose another 50 pounds this year, right? It's anything in that direction. I get to say, hey, yeah, I did that this year.
A couple of years ago, I didn't know about the lantern example, but I was talking to a family member, and they were asking me a goal, and I said, I want to have, at the time I didn't really have words around this, what we're talking about, but I knew I wanted more connection with extended family relationships. So I did do this breakdown of, like, I would call someone in my extended family. I would send a thank you note. I tried to do like a quarterly, we would get to know each other. And this family member looked at me shocked, like she had never considered that being a goal. And she said, and it was New Year's Eve. And it was exactly what you were just, how do you measure that? I mean, there was no like award anyone gave me. There wasn't this great spreadsheet or a scale we could step on and go, yeah, we're closer. But I looked back over 12 months and I thought,
you worked on it.
I had cultivated stronger relationships with people in my extended family that I would normally, I don't see them every day. It was sometimes just hit and a miss. And I had made that a goal. But it was really value driven because I value connection as well. And so I love this idea. I hope this is helpful. I hope you will share it. Even a predominant number of viewers on Women of Worth Wednesday are women, but men need permission to have a conversation around this.
I have all my clients do it the first of the year. Men and women, we all choose 2 values for the year.
Because it's freeing to the men in your life too. They can also be very driven in a different way about what it looks like measurably in a bank account or wherever else.
Still the not enough are there.
And also, I think this was a great conversation for your non-Latter-day Saint friends, because I know that we do have some in this community that reach around the world. Please share where you're watching from. Thank you, Kristie.
You're welcome. Thanks
for teaching not only by your words, but your example as well. So I appreciate, she's a great woman of worth in my life. And thank you to all of you that have joined today and have continued on your progression through this sometimes crazy life, and that you don't give up and that you keep trying with the rest of us. And please remember that you are a woman of great worth. And we'll see you next week.